this is Christina Caudill with Radiant Astrology, and this is the episode on the solar eclipse in Aquarius. Today I have a very special guest, the sacred artist Briana Saussy from brianasaussy.com. Briana is someone I've been following online for a number of years now, and I'm so honored to have her as a guest today on the podcast. I asked her to come on the show because during every eclipse period, I get a ton of requests for rituals to mark this very special time of transition and transformation. And I thought, who better to get some thoughts on how to ritualize this sacred eclipse vortex period than Briana, who is a sacred artist, a curandera, and just an overall powerful feminine force. And so in a bit, I'll be talking with Briana about the solar eclipse in Aquarius, about what it means to be a sacred artist, and we touch on some very interesting ideas of the phases of a woman's life: maiden, mother, crone, and one I hadn't heard of before, the queen, which you'll definitely want to hear a little bit more about that. But first, I wanted to just remind you that eclipse season that we're in right now is a wonderful time to gain insight on your personal destiny through an astrology reading. I offer readings for personal insight and guidance on your life path. So to book a session, go to radiantastrology.com and visit the services page, and you'll see all of the variety of services around astrology that I offer. And I'm a huge believer in eclipse periods as very profound times of transformation. There are these portals of energy that can really help us to shift our destiny, actually, and to co-create. During this time, I'm always hosting an eclipse circle, which begins usually prior to the first eclipse, because the eclipses typically come in pairs. And this one is called Co-Create Your Destiny, and it's an amazing group of 22 women. And we have this special women's circle that's part astrology course, part alchemy coven. We do rituals and ceremonies, as well as delve into the astrological symbolism. These eclipse circles usually last about 6 weeks. And so it's been over 3 years now that I've been doing these eclipse circles. And if this sounds like something that you'd be interested in learning more about, be sure you're on my newsletter at radiantastrology.com. The next eclipse circle will be this summer. There will be 3 eclipses in a row, and they're really big ones because Pluto and Mars are in the mix with those. And so definitely don't hesitate if this sounds like something that you would love to be a part of, because I know everyone that's a part of it really feels very supported. And so this past weekend in the Eclipse Circle, we had a very special guest, my teacher and mentor, Mark Jones from the UK. And he is an astrologer and a therapist, and really at the leading edge of counseling-orientated astrology. And he paid us a special visit to host a masterclass on destiny, where he laid out his insights and his research and his experience with working with thousands of clients on destiny, fate, and free will. And it was a very powerful couple of sessions with him. We have about 2.5 hours of recordings with his teachings. And I've decided to offer the Destiny Masterclass as a special recording package. And right now, if you purchase it on pre-order, you can save 20% until March 1st. So visit radiantastrology.com for details and check out the Masterclass on Destiny with special guest Mark Jones. Now, as for the solar eclipse in Aquarius, any solar eclipse is a new moon, right? It's when the sun joins the moon, and that is a period of planting seeds for a new cycle to begin, right? And so the new moon in Aquarius will mature in 6 months at the full moon in Aquarius. And so that's a time for whatever we plant now to see how it may mature and grow over the coming months. And now because this is an eclipse, then that means the new moon is conjunct the nodes of destiny, the nodal axis. And so that is why this feels like a time where we can see, twists of fate and shifts of destiny. And it's a time where we want to really pay attention to the potential that we have right now of releasing from the past. And especially in a sign like Aquarius. Aquarius is about liberating and about living your authenticity, being authentic, even if it looks weird or strange or doesn't fit, society's judgments about what's right and wrong and appropriate. Aquarius really is about evolution. It's about more and more authenticity. And it's an air sign, so it has a lot to do with the realm of ideas, brilliant ideas, maybe ideas whose time has come, or maybe whose time isn't quite, we haven't quite caught up with it yet. And this eclipse has a lot to do with communication and ideas. Eclipses come in families, which are called sorrow series families, and Bernadette Brady, the astrologer and the author of Eagle and the Lark, is sort of the quintessential expert on the eclipses and the sorrow series. And so this solar eclipse is part of sorrow series SS1 South, which has a specific message for this family of eclipses. And Bernadette Brady writes, "The family of eclipses are concerned with ideas and their enthusiastic expression. If this eclipse affects your chart, it will be flooded with ideas or options. There may seem to be an element of haste, but if you could go with new ideas, they will have positive outcomes." So just keeping that in mind, what are some of the ideas that are just really compelling you to go further, to delve deeper? It's interesting because just now today, I posted on my Facebook page that idea of, there's Mother, Maiden, and Crone. And between the phase of Maiden and Crone is the Queen. And this is something that I just heard from Briana in our interview. And I posted it on my Facebook page, and it just went berserk. So many women saying, "Oh my God, this is amazing. It's such a revelation." And many other women tell me they've been working with this concept for many years. So I think it's something that I'm going to bring more into my work, especially because I do work a lot with the feminine principle, the yin principle, and the rising of yin in the world through both men and women. Primarily I've been working with women, but I've been having more and more men, that are sensitive, that have that femininity in them, then they want to nourish it and nurture it. And I'm just as interested in and care about nurturing the feminine within men as well. And so when we look back at Aquarius, Aquarius is a fixed sign. And so that suggests that there's something that's meant to crystallize within us, to get solid within, something that we can integrate into our being, for years to come, or maybe even the rest of our lives. What is it that's compelling you now, that is at the leading edge of your evolution, especially in the realm of ideas? And so now this eclipse is, as we said, is conjunct the nodes. It's specifically conjunct the south node. So there's a little paradox here. We think of new moons as a new phase starting, but the new moon conjunct the south node is, the south node tends to be about release. And so that says to me, what is it that we need to release that will help us to liberate into our next phase of being? And when we have the south node conjunct the sun, that's a dissolving of our old identity. And the south node conjunct the moon is a dissolving of attachments to the past. So there is a sense of dissolving, especially now. As I record this, the 3 days before the new moon is the balsamic phase, and that's the banishing phase. That's the time to really just release. It's the darkest time of the cycle. And Aquarius is also about, the idea that it's not about me. It's not about my own personal ego, my own attachment to my ego. It's about a higher purpose greater than the self, greater than the individual self, but the higher purpose that connects us to all. Aquarius, can be objective and detached, which is something that we want especially when we're dealing with things that can be highly emotional. This solar eclipse new moon is conjunct both Mercury, there's that communication again, and Juno, which is the partnership asteroid. Now, Juno is known, it signifies all types of partnerships. Sometimes it means love, marriage. It tends to be seen traditionally as a marriage asteroid. But I've also seen it in business partnerships or colleague type relationships, partnerships. Because we're in Aquarius, there is some sort of suggestion that we're looking at partnerships in a whole new, inventive type of way. And it's interesting because I posted the other day this beautiful quote by Antoine Saint-Exupéry, the author of the Little Prince, Le Petit Prince, one of my favorites. And it said, "Love does not exist in gazing at each other, but in looking outward together in the same direction." And I posted that because Venus was activating the eclipse point in Aquarius. And so we think about love, and what is love? Is it just like, being so enthralled by another human being? When we talk about Aquarian love, then it's a different type of intimacy. Maybe it's having a shared purpose. Can we love our friends, and can we also be friends with our lovers, right? And I had many people sharing that right now they're dealing with things like a lack of intimacy, or having to, I had a couple of people said that their, significant others wanted to sort of have open relationships, and they thought, oh, well, does this mean I should do it because it's in the astrology? No, the astrology, when we look at, the astrology for the collective, it shows us the archetypes and the energy that is presenting to us. Now, the magic and beauty of astrology is how it interacts with our own personal chart, right? If I write something about what the, eclipse means, it can have that influence for many people, but we are each individuals. We each have our own astrology. We each, and even beyond that astrology, we each have our own level of consciousness. So that's why you need an individual astrology reading. Don't expect like a horoscope to have all the answers for you. You need to be doing your own personal inner work. And an astrology reading with an astrologer, the one that, is skilled in counseling dynamics, can be very, very helpful. And so, getting back to the Aquarius solar eclipse new moon, we want to remember that Aquarius is the realm of ideas, but it's also the non-linear type of knowledge and ideas, right? I mean, there's Mercury mixed in with this eclipse. Mercury is, the sort of the mind of, our everyday mind, if you will. And the higher octave of Mercury is Uranus, which is the modern ruler of Aquarius. And Uranus is the higher mind. It's that non-linear type of wisdom and knowledge. It's the flashes of insight, that you don't know why something suddenly strikes you as truth, but it just does, right? It's something that you maybe even feel like as an electric shock through your body. Like that's the potential of a Uranian insight. And Aquarius is about the collective purpose and causes and collective movements that carry us along, where we say, it's time for this movement to ripen. Now, we've been seeing a lot of that, especially as Uranus is at the tail end of Aries, is wrapping up Aries. Aries is that fire sign. And so we can get carried away by these ideas, but ultimately, we want to remember that Aquarius wants us to be detached and objective just enough to be able to see the truth, through our own personal lens, and beyond our own personal prejudices and judgments. So I just definitely wanted to wish you a very beautiful solar eclipse in Aquarius, no matter how it happens to impact you. Just know that this is a very profound time where the alignments of the sun and the moon and the earth are really coming into a space of creativity. And so we want to be part of that creative impulse. And so if you want to skip directly to the suggestions Briana has for the ritual for solar eclipse, it is about, 45 minutes in maybe. And she talks about a ritual that is simple yet profound. And I love that. I was so happy when I heard her say she loves to keep it simple with her rituals, because I really believe in simple, doing what works, and just being focused and putting all of your psychic energy and intention into any ritual you do, and letting the universe take that and run with it. Without further ado, I will share with you my beautiful interview with the amazing sacred artist, Briana Saussy. Enjoy. Hi, this is Christina Caudill with Radiant Astrology. And as I record this, we are in between the eclipses. We're in that very powerful eclipse vortex. And what better time to be engaging in this very potent energy than with enjoying the company of some like-minded other magical people. And today I'm very honored to have as my guest Briana Saussy from brianasaussy.com. Hi, Briana.
Hi, Christine. Thank you so much for having me.
For those of my listeners who aren't familiar with your work, I'll read a little bit about your bio. Briana Saussy is a writer, teacher, and spiritual counselor. Briana is well grounded in the world's great religions and intellectual traditions, as well as Western psychological practices. She holds a BA and MA in Eastern and Western classics, philosophy, mathematics, and science from St. John's College, and is a student of ancient Greek and Sanskrit. And she has been a dedicated student of psychoanalyst Dr. Clarissa Pinkola Estes' cross-cultural studies program in Colorado. With that, I would love to welcome Briana. Thank you so much for joining me.
Absolutely. Thank you again for having me. I'm so happy to be here in the middle of all of the eclipse magic.
Yes. And I definitely wanted to get your take on all things magic and alchemical. And, as I'm an astrologer, and so I mostly focus on person-centered astrology, helping empower people through their astrological symbols. But, there's always the opportunity to align even more with what's going on in the cosmos through grounding the energy through ritual and magic. And during this time, I consider this a really alchemical time. We're all in sort of this alchemical sort of soup together. And I get so many questions from people for what kind of ritual can I do right now for this eclipse? And I was really curious to get your take on that, because I have taken some traditional magic type classes or astrological magic classes that are really very much about timing. And they're very wary about doing magic during eclipses because of the fact that the sun or the moon are in shadow. And I guess it's considered more unpredictable to know what your results are when you do magic during an eclipse. So 2 questions. How do you feel about doing magic during eclipses? And what's the difference really between ritual and magic, or are they the same thing?
Those are both really great questions. So my attitude around doing magic during eclipses is that it can be very powerful and very potent and very transformative, to talk about alchemy. Very, very transformative if you are working it in the right way. And so we can talk about that more in a bit. But, I think that eclipses, I think that the idea that there are certain things that you shouldn't do during an eclipse is not completely wrong. But I think it's kind of been taken to almost mean like you shouldn't do anything during an eclipse. And that also doesn't really gel for me. So I'm a fan. I'm definitely a fan of doing magic during the eclipse. And actually, one of my offerings that I made available publicly this year is called Eclipse Magic. And the whole idea was, getting a group of people together to make some intentional magic around the eclipse. And so then the difference between ritual and magic, a ritual is, so I would say all magic occurs in a ritual setting, or there's a ritual quality to all magic, but not all rituals are magical. So, right, when we brush our teeth, when we wash our face, when we kiss our child goodnight, like those are all rituals that we may have, right? And you can look at your life and just look at a day in your life, and you'll find that there are many different rituals that are just part of your day. And we typically think of them as routines. And what I would say makes the difference is, if you start to see the deeper significance of the routine, and you start to become aware of the deeper intention behind the routine, then it turns into a ritual, right? It takes on a little bit more of a numinous quality. So some of those rituals, many of those rituals are not explicitly magical, right? We're not trying to transform anything or, encourage a certain outcome to happen. We're doing things that support ourselves in various ways. Does that get to the difference?
Yeah, I love what you say about ritual and routine, right? Because part of what I feel really helps to bring more meaning into the experience of daily life is bringing the sacred into every day. And so I think by doing that, you can really maybe reframe the idea of routine and make it into a ritual. I think it's Matt Kahn that has this saying that, when you brush your teeth, like with every clean tooth, another soul experiences, perfect peace or something like that.
Yeah, sure. Right. Exactly. Or, just a recognition that I'm engaging, right? When I brush my teeth, I'm engaging in an act of cleaning and purification, and may the words that come out of my mouth throughout the rest of the day be clean, be pure, right? Be something that's restorative and brings people and things into better health, not diminishes that.
One thing that I have been actually really sort of delving into recently is alchemy and the alchemy of the eclipse season, and sort of just bringing it into conscious awareness. And with the work of Carl Jung, I'm reading one of his biographies right now. And later in life, he really went deeply into the study of alchemy, and he was very much opposed to the idea of alchemy having been, the rudimentary or the early forms of, say, modern science or modern medicine. It's actually its own thing. It's like,
Right.
I think that's why the reasons why people dismiss it so much, because they think, oh, there was alchemy and then we developed science and medicine and we can throw away the alchemical stuff.
Yep, that's right.
Yeah. But so what's your view with alchemy and how do you practice it?
A lot of people today, when we talk about alchemy, we really focus on the inner alchemical process. And Jung, as a psychoanalyst, of course, he was really interested in that. So kind of, changing the internal lead of ourselves into gold. And, that it's an interior process. It's an internal process. It is a psychic process. It might be a psychoanalytical process that you would do with a therapist, right? Like the idea is kind of that you take the stuff that's heavy and not as rare, not as precious, and that you refine it in various ways, burning off what isn't needed and changing it into something that is of lasting value. And I think that's a really potent way to look at it. The way that I look at alchemy and magic working together is magic has an internal and an external quality. So, when I'm working with a client and we're creating a ritual or we're creating a ceremony for them, say they want to get a better job, very commonly requested thing. There are things that I will do, right? There are candles that will be anointed, or there are altars that will be created. There are offerings that will be made. But then there's also the internal shift that I need the person that I'm working with to make. So, if they have been telling themselves a story that the job they have right now is the best job they can ever get, we need to unravel that, right? We need to stop telling ourselves that story, and we need to replace it with a different story, because we can do all the magic in the world and we can have the best ingredients and the most exotic looking altars. And if our internal state is not matching with what we're trying to accomplish, then obviously we're going to have difficulties. So I see that alchemical process is the interior process. So it might be like the story needs to change, or it might be that there are some practical actions that need to be taken, like the person that I'm working with who wants a better job. One of the first things I'm going to ask is, what have you applied for, and have you applied, and what are you going for? Find out what's your application process. What are you doing to try to get that better job? And so those internal shifts are what I see as really alchemical. Like, they start to shift our internal perception and expectations, and that really in turn allows the road for magic to be open and to be clear, so that the magic that we create can be as effective as possible.
Oh, that's beautiful. I know for my group that I'm hosting right now, the Eclipse Circle, in order to really get people to sort of conceptualize, this process we're going through, we separated it into 4 phases. The separation phase of the alchemy, the purification, the reintegration, and perfection. And so we're sort of I'm leading them through these, and we don't do the manifestation part until we are like near the end of that process. And in the beginning, as soon as people get into the circle, they're like, they want to make magic and manifest and everything like that. But, as you said, you can still keep trying to make magic and keep manifest. But if your internal sort of energetic alignment hasn't shifted, you'll probably just keep attracting more of the same. So it's really leaving space for those internal shifts to take place.
A lot of people who first come into my community come in because they want to learn how to pray. They want to learn how to bless themselves, and they haven't grown up in a tradition that teaches them how to do that in a way that feels really supportive and nourishing and nurturing. And so I created a free class like years ago, called Blessing Ways. That's about how to pray, all the different ways we have available to pray. So, whatever your interest is within the sacred arts, I have really found in my life and in as I teach and as I work with people, that our stories, right, our myths, our legends, our folklore, our fairy tales, those are the primary source materials for all of these subjects that we practice. So, we often you'll hear things like, well, this was an oral tradition and we've lost the tradition, and things happened to people, the women who were practicing witches were burned, things happened to natural healers. And so so much of this knowledge has been lost. And while that is true for sure, we also really do have a body of primary source material that we can go back to again and again. And it is in the form of fairy tales and folk tales and myth and legend. And so I completely agree with you. I think storytelling is essential if you're interested in this kind of stuff, right?
Well, it's the power of the spoken word and the power of the written word, and choosing the exact right words, just as you would choose, the exact right crystal for your altar, or, the perfect oil for your ritual. Like when I read the blessings that you write, you did one recently for the eclipse, and I just thought it was just so perfect and so beautiful how it sort of like commanded, something within to say, I am releasing this and may it be blessed. There really is a lot of power in that, I find. And I wanted to also just talk a little bit about your background as a curandera. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yes. So the other reason I refer to myself as a sacred artist is because I pull from two folk magic traditions. So half of my family is Catholic. They immigrated to San Antonio from West Texas, and ethnically they're your typical mix of Scots Irish and German, Jewish. Actually, I have several Jewish ancestors from Eastern Europe, and Mexican. And so they came into San Antonio and brought with them the set of folk magic and folk practices called curandera, which is really a healing tradition, right, that involves Catholicism and involves folk healing traditions, but there is also a magical component to it. So in curandera, the focus is often on healing and restoration, and that can be physical healing, it can be mental healing, it can be emotional healing, spiritual healing, often practiced by women, but certainly you do have male practitioners as well. There is a focus on a hard focus, I would say, on cleansing and blessing. I would say, a good 85% of the work is cleansing and blessing. There's also a great knowledge of medicinal herbs and native plants, especially that grow in the Southwest, grow in Mexico, grow in Texas, New Mexico. And curandera is interesting because it has gained some esteem, and there's actually now a big conference at UNM every summer that has various traditional healers from Mexico, from South and Central America coming in and sharing some of their traditional healing ways. And so it is really focused, like I said, on healing. And then the other half of my family, they are from East Texas and Louisiana, rural, and many of them didn't know how to read, didn't know how to write. Like my grandfather had to quit school in the 8th grade. And they are Scots, Irish, Welsh, Native American, primarily Cherokee and Choctaw, and African American. And so they brought with them various techniques that come out of the hoodoo or the conjure tradition, which is another folk magic tradition.
And you said they consider themselves like conjurers, is that it?
Yeah, so the word conjurer or conjure woman is a title you would find in hoodoo, and also, interestingly enough, a title that you would find in like British folk magic or Scottish folk magic. And you might also hear the term cunning man or cunning woman. So that's cunning as in C-U-N-N-I-N-G, like clever, right? Yeah. Clever, smart, tricky. And so they practice conjure. It's also sometimes called root magic because there is an emphasis on working with plants and with roots in a lot of the different things that we do. So those two traditions very much informed my upbringing and my approach to the sacred arts. I'm a folk magician. Like, I'm very interested in what's practical, what's doable, what is effective. But I have a very loaded 8th house. So.
Oh yeah, that's where the occult comes in right there.
Exactly.
Yeah, we were talking about, the idea of the witch, because you don't refer to yourself as a witch. And so can you tell us a little bit about sort of the ideas behind that?
Yes, absolutely. So, this comes from my more traditional upbringing and my more traditional client base. So I love the way that the word witch is being worked with and reclaimed culturally. I think it's very powerful, and I think it's really critical work that's happening. I don't use it to describe myself or my work, primarily because there's often a perception in those traditions that a witch is somebody who practices malevolent magic. So somebody who would curse, somebody who would hurt, somebody who would harm through magic. And so there was a cultural kind of interruption. And in many languages and many cultures, people differentiate between good magical workers and bad magical workers. So, in Curandera, we have the bruja is like the bad magical worker. Now, there are people who are working to kind of reclaim these terms and take them out of this like binary setting. But when you're working day in and day out with clients, and this is their tradition, and this is what they come out of, I find it to be more expedient to use other terms that are not so loaded, right? Mm-hmm. So that's why. Now, I think the etymology of witch is really fascinating, and the fact that the root has to do with wisdom and has to do with a way of turning things and moving energy and being in both worlds is really right on. And one of my favorite writers, Pam Grossman, does a ton with the term witch and with the icon of the witch. And it's really powerful, gorgeous work.
Because you do a lot around like blessings, which I think is beautiful, and bringing the idea of blessing back into, that's like bringing the sacred into our everyday and knowing that we have the power to bless.
There's a wonderful quote from Scotland when the witch trials were happening there. A woman was on trial for being a witch, and they asked a man who was a witness at the trial if she was, right, super like unbiased and just not. So anyway, but they asked him, they said, is she a witch? And he said, she's either a witch or a woman of God. And I really love that quote, because what he's pointing to is how slippery this language is, and how there are many people who identify as witches who are interested in blessing work. And there are people who don't identify as witches who practice malevolent forms of magic. But I really love that idea that she's a witch or a woman of God. And of course, the question, like the follow-up question is, what's the difference? Like, where is that difference? And I believe that in this particular trial, the woman was actually found innocent, and I wonder if that complication that this gentleman brought up when asked directly, if it created some confusion among the part of the magistrates, and so they weren't able to lock her up, set her on fire, all the various things that they did.
So now it's almost just like the cycle has come back around, and women have the ability to empower ourselves. And part of that empowerment is taking on, our ability to be healers and magicians, and, and using our power for good. And even in reaction to instill, that term witch has negative connotations, seeing so many women now, like, as you said, reclaiming the terminology, and women are starting to realize it's not something to play with. And that's why I appreciate your work and your position as a teacher, as an elder, and the fact that you have this in your roots and in your blood. I just thank you so much for sharing it, because, it's more than just putting out our crystals on a full moon, and creating a crystal grid or saging, whatever. I mean, there's so much more to it. And I just love how you share such a rich sort of library of your resources.
Well, thank you so much. Yes, it is my total pleasure to do it. I am 100% dedicated to the sacred arts and to making them accessible, to, educating people about them, and to honoring the lineage that they come out of, which is a lineage that I truly believe and know that we all have access to, we all participate in. These are deep practices, they're deep teachings, they're deep traditions that, because of where we are in history right now, have kind of become mystified and made exotic in certain ways, and even fetishized in certain ways that I think is really not helpful, because it keeps everyone from feeling like they have access to magic, feeling like they have access to receiving information and inspiration from the other world. And I truly believe that for most of human history, people live much closer to that knowledge. So I am doing my little tiny part to help bring that back.
Well, we were also talking before about the idea of, the importance of ceremony and ritual in marking those transitions in life. And, in our current society, most people consider, any kind of significant ritual being like a wedding, or being, the birth of a child, or death. Those are pretty much the three times in life where we really sort of engage in ritual. But more and more, more people not feeling like they need traditional marriage or relationship, especially the Pluto and Libra generation that I know I'm and and also not having children. And you can't get away from the death one, though, unfortunately. But we still need those moments to mark, moments of initiation, moments of transformation, where we can say, I'm leaving the old me behind, the childish ways or the ways that just don't serve me. And I'm entering a new phase in my life. And there are times that are worth marking. And, when we engage in ritual and ceremony, there's something about it that just really feels like it takes us back to our deep roots, a connection with our ancestors or something like that.
Yeah, I think the way that you discussed it is really, really beautiful. I think that we are both the beneficiaries and, in a way, the victims of modern democracy, where we have so many different ways that are available to us, but most of us don't have, a single tradition that is kind of like the end all and be all. And, when you talk to people who come from more established traditional societies, they have their own limitations, right? Because often, for instance, there are certain things that are just not allowed, like men loving other men, or women loving other women, or a woman not wanting to have kids, right? Like, a lot of those things are just like not okay. But there are set ways of honoring various changes that everyone goes through. And that builds a kind of cohesion, and it builds a kind of identity that everyone has a share in. And here, like, we have the opposite, right? Which is, you do what works for you and I do what works for me, which is really beautiful in so many ways. And of course, many of us here are the recipients of many different traditions, many different ethnicities, many different cultures. So even more confusing, like which way is my way? And so in all of that, it's hard sometimes to remember, oh, this is a big moment. This is a big deal, and this needs to be honored in some way, right? It needs to be tangibly recognized. And even if I don't have, a tight-knit group of family members or friends to witness it and to recognize it, like I need to mark it for myself in some way. So, we have culturally sanctioned ways, like your wedding. If you do get married, as you pointed out, like that is a very elaborate ritual for many people, but we don't really have a beautiful ritual for people who consciously decide not to get married, which is, I think, a real sadness, right, and a real lack. And there are some people who are working on that. We have many rituals that honor mothers and those of us who have children, especially biological children. We have very little that honors or recognizes people who have either chosen not to have children or who cannot have children and yet mother in different ways. And so I think, like, I would like to see us take the best of what is, a developed liberal democracy where there are many ways and a recognition of many different paths and many possibilities. And I would like us to fuse that with a more traditional understanding that certain choices, certain phases in life, certain moments really are initiations. And they change us. They change us within, and a ritual can acknowledge that there is an outer change as well that we want to be in alignment with.
It makes me think of earlier last year. I was in Costa Rica, and I was fortunate to host a womb blessing for women. I think we had about 80 women. And, there was a good number of them that no longer had wombs, but we still energetically bless their womb. And there is part of this ritual where you can take like a glass of wine and pour it into the earth and just let that sort of symbolize the blood of your womb, giving back to Mother Earth. And it was so beautiful. And so all the women were so moved by it. And, there were the ones that said, oh, I no longer have a womb. At first they thought, oh, I shouldn't, this isn't for me. This isn't, I don't belong in this ceremony. But it actually, because this was a ceremony from the Munaiki, this shamanic lineage from Peru, it specifically said that, if a woman doesn't have a womb, she's still encouraged to attend. And I mean, it was powerful for women of all ages and no matter what their womb situation was. I mean, because we still energetically have carried, our pain and our shame and our fear in this part of our body. And the point of the blessing was to clear that. And to know that this is actually where love and creativity and joy are meant to be birthed from, not a place to store fear and pain. So I just thought is really beautiful. And I think that takes us also to this notion that you and I were talking about of the three phases of the woman's life, the maiden, mother, and crone. And as you'd said, there's many other phases within those, but just even those three phases we don't tend to recognize here in the West. And I think it's time that we start to.
Yeah, no, I very much agree. And, in my family, we're very blessed right now because we have, my little boy has his great-grandmother. My grandmother is alive and very healthy, right? My Nana, every now and then I talk about her on social media. My Nana is about to turn 84 and she's in really amazing health. And, she's the other side of teen pregnancy. She got pregnant with my mom when she was 18 years old, which, now we all are very shocked when that happens, and we think it's completely negative. And of course, I'm not advocating for teenagers to go get pregnant, but I will say she's around, right? She's around for her great grandson, which is pretty awesome. And so we see in my family the mother and the maiden and the crone. And sometimes there's another phase that women will talk about called the queen, which is kind of in those perimenopausal and menopausal years where before, right after the mothering, your active mothering is done and your crone years are yet to begin. And of course, now, we have young women who are choosing or again, cannot be biological mothers and are maybe deciding that mother as a role doesn't really fit with them at all. My take on that is that men and women, right, and those who don't identify as either, we have all of this within us. Like we carry all of it within us. All of it is potential that we have access to. And so, I like to, when I'm working with my clients and this comes up, I like to remind them that, the youngest of us have access to incredible elder wisdom. And if you hang out with kids, you see this all of the time. Like they say the coolest things, they ask the deepest questions, right? And so they have a very wise and wizened part of themselves. And even when little babies are born, they look old. They look so ancient. They're little and they're wrinkly and they're little old wise people. And so that we carry that. And then on the other side, like our oldest members of society have within them the maiden, or they have within them the youth, right?
Right,
like they
child even.
The child. And, there every now and then there's that viral post that goes around on social media that talks about what happened. I believe it's in the Seattle area where they built a preschool next to a nursing home. And part of the preschool experience is the little children go to the nursing home and they're with the very old who are there, and how beneficial it is for both parties, right? For the little children and for the really old people. And I think that what we are seeing there is a physical manifestation of what we also see internally. Like if you will let the youngest part of yourself and the oldest parts of yourself inform where you are right now, wherever you are, however old you are, like your experience is fuller.
Yeah, you know what that reminds me of? I remember reading an article in the New York Times where there was an elderly lady with dementia that was in a home for the elderly, and her family came to visit her, and they were just so outraged because the staff there had allowed this elderly lady to have a little baby doll, and the baby doll she would care for, because she had been a young mother. And some of the family members were like, oh, this is so disgraceful that, she's an old woman. She shouldn't have a baby doll. But actually the hospital had said that it was very healing for her because it reminded her, she didn't really know where she was most of the time anyway, because she had dementia, but it helped calm her down because she reminded her of being this nurturer and caring for the child. And it was like the happiest time of her life when she was a young mother. And that actually tends to be a good practice for them, rather than, giving some of these people, drugs to calm them down if they don't know where they are or whatever. They said giving them the women, giving them a doll really can help them to calm down and remember what it was like to be, the joyous young mother again. I thought that was so beautiful, how healing that can be, no matter what age.
Yeah, absolutely. I so agree with that.
You said that between the mother and the crone is the queen phase. I love that. I hadn't heard that, but I definitely feel like I'm reaching that myself.
Yeah, I started hearing about it, I would say maybe like 10 or 15 years ago. And mostly, one of the groups of people who have done a lot of work around this are Dianic, which is is one of the terms used to describe them. They're feminist witches, they're women. And they tend to really work within a female-centered or female-exclusive system and framework. And so they have looked a lot at like how women change and develop. And there were a lot of women who, perimenopause, premenstrual, right? Like, before the onset of menses is a very liminal time. I mean, peri literally means like around, right? So it's this liminal period in a woman's life that can last for, several years, and your hormones are changing and you have all of these physical changes that you're experiencing. But, and of course, so there are also internal changes. And there were a lot of women who felt like, moving from mother to crone was a little, like extreme, there needed
like
to be
stepping off of a cliff or something.
Yeah, because they were like, well, I don't feel quite like a crone yet. Like I don't feel wise enough to be like a crone, or I don't feel like I'm quite there yet. And so they developed one of the phases that they developed to kind of address that is the phase of queen, that this is a time where a woman can come into her sovereignty in a new way, in a deeper way, acknowledging the shifts that are happening while also, not forcing yourself into a new category in a way that feels premature.
Mm-hmm. And what it makes me think of is, as a mother, you are really concerned, like everything in you is heightened in concern for, a small, helpless growing being, especially when it's a baby. But as that being, that baby, that child grows, then the mother has to also grow. And I mean, some of the most devastating times I see that women talk about is when the children are, when they finally have the empty nest. And so I think there's obviously a huge shift that happens. But then eventually the shift comes to turning back to yourself. I think a lot of women, mothers probably don't realize how much of their energy and focus went into this child. And at some point the child wants their independence, needs to individuate. Mm-hmm. And in doing so, that is actually a gift that the mother can, like you said, reclaim her sovereignty and learn to be a crone, because there's still that, you're still moving into that next phase. Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And learning how to mother yourself and nourish yourself now that you actually have the time. That's great. Well, do you have anything you'd like to suggest for our listeners around the solar eclipse? I'm committed to getting this out by the time of the solar eclipse. What can they do to really honor it from like a ritual perspective? Now, this is a solar eclipse. It's a new moon in Aquarius. So something around a new moon in Aquarius, solar eclipse in Aquarius. So, I look at eclipses as times to break patterns. Mm. And I told you earlier, like my basis is folk magic. I come from pretty plain people. And so, when you look at the sky and you can see the eclipse happen, right, which of course we can't always, but when you do, what you see is an interruption in what is otherwise a regular cycle, right? The sun and the moon are two of our most regular cycling celestial bodies. We've literally set our calendars by their motion. So an eclipse is an interruption of that regular cyclical motion, right? From where we sit, from our perspective, looking up at the sky, last year's
very dramatic solar eclipse. Like, it's the middle of the day where I was, and all of a sudden it got very dark. And that's an interruption of business as usual. So from a magical perspective, I see that as a prime time to break patterns. Mm-hmm. So when I said earlier, I think that there are kinds of magic that can be done really well during eclipses. This is what I was referring to. I think that we all have patterns that over time we recognize need to be broken, right? They're not relevant anymore. They're not useful to us anymore. Maybe they never were. Maybe they were for a period of time, but that time is now over. So we have patterns, we have habits, and this can be anything from like really practical stuff, like, the fact that you're eating too many salty foods and you just found out that your blood pressure is high, to really like more interior subjective things, like, you've been telling yourself a story about how successful you can be, or how much money you can make, or, what kind of partnerships you have to have, that is no longer suitable, no longer relevant. So it can be really practical, it can be, really immediate, or it can be longer term and more interior. But, we all have patterns that we recognize, hey, this isn't working. Stories, beliefs, habits, patterns. So I think eclipses are wonderful times to address this. And, when I'm looking at making magic, one of the things that I would recommend, and I'm sure people could like talk to you or go to your site to get more insight into this, is look at where the eclipse is happening. So, we had a lunar eclipse in Leo, right? Mm-hmm. At the end of January, that gorgeous full super blood moon lunar eclipse, mm-hmm. everything in Leo. And now we have the solar eclipse in Aquarius. So, I would think about Aquarius. I would think about my role in my communities. I would think about my habits around technology and internet use. Virtual communities to me are very Aquarian. I might think about, like, am I on social media too much? Am I not present enough, right? Do I like the habits around my smartphone usage, or do I not? Like, I would look at some of those things. I would look at, if you have a web presence, I would look at, am I presenting myself in the best possible way? Like, is this, is what I'm saying about myself still true, still relevant? Because, hey, we are moving targets, right? We change. And so I would look at some of the themes that really have to do with Aquarius. I'd look at, my message, like, am I broadcasting my message in the best way? Am I amplifying what I have to say in the best way? Am I sharing collectively? And I'd also look at, things like, what's my vision of the future? What legacy am I creating? Or what stories around the future and around legacy are maybe no longer really good for me that I need to let go of? So I always have my people start with that kind of a process, right? And it's something that you can talk out with your love or your friend or your magical study buddy, or it's something that you can journal on. And then I think a really powerful thing to do, and this is a banishing technique, to banish something, of course, means that you get rid of it. Once you've identified what the habit is, or what the story is, or what the pattern is that you want to release, write it down on a piece of paper. You might just write down a few words, or you might write a whole essay on what it is and where it came from and how it makes you feel and how it's interrupting your life or not helping you. And then you take that paper and you burn it. You set it on fire and you burn it. This is a very good thing to do, like in your kitchen sink where you cannot catch things on fire. Mm-hmm. And then you take those ashes and you go to a crossroads. So this is any kind of intersection, any kind of intersection that has either two roads or in some cases three roads that cross over each other. And you scatter those ashes and you let the four directions and the four winds of the four directions take them and scatter them, so that you no longer have, they are no longer present in your life. They've been taken up and out by the wind, and they can be transformed into something that is good and useful either for you or for someone else. So it's a very simple banishing technique that, many of my people have had a lot of success with, and it's a lovely thing to do right as the eclipse is happening, and you have that interruption.
That is amazing. I never thought about the crossroads thing, but that sounds like it would really have, that would just be already sort of energetically charged. Because at any crossroads, people always have to make a decision,
Right.
Or,
right.
Yeah. Like, am I going straight? Am I going left? Am I going right? And especially this eclipse being in Aquarius, being about liberation, and freedom. And so even more, I would think it would be even more charged time, as you said, to break patterns, and to liberate yourself from that which has been stuck. And I love that you talk about banishing. You see, I'm always seeing people saying like banishing at a full moon and planting seeds at a new moon. Actually it's the balsamic phase, which is just before the new moon, which is the most powerful banishing time.
That's right. That is exactly right. Yeah. Yes.
And so, and in order to then plant seeds after the new moon, then, you want to make sure that you've just like sort of gotten out of the way, that which is holding you back or that needs banishing. So, I think that's great. And the full moon, I love, I just feel it usually being a charge time of illuminating that which maybe, need to start to release, because, the light of the sun being reflected by the moon, we start to see things and things come to fruition. But I like to use the balsamic phase as the time to really say, I'm letting go and I'm liberating myself.
Yeah. Yes, I completely agree. And, I also for me, the full moon is very much a time of, it's a time of celebration. It's a time to say thank you for all of the gifts and all of the blessings that have been received over the last 14-day phase.
Yes, it's a really powerful time of gratitude. And I find for me, like just simple magic is just grateful, it's just to be grateful, have gratitude. And it's amazing what you can manifest just through gratitude.
Absolutely. No, that's so true.
Okay, great. Well, I definitely wanted to make sure that I point everyone to your website. Now, am I saying your last name right? It's Saussy?
It is Saussy. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I just assumed I always knew what it was. Okay. So BrianaSaussy.com. That's BrianaSaussy.com. And I just purchased your Book of Hours, the Sacred Arts Book of Hours. It's so beautiful. I love, who's the designer? Don't you use like one designer for everything? Because everything
I use one designer for everything. Yes, I do. Her name is Cassandra Oswald. And I'm a fan, obviously.
Yes. It just looks so magical. So beautiful.
Thank you.
And so the Book of Hours is like a calendar for the year that has all the new moons and actually all the quarter moons. The new moons.
It has all of it. It has the new moons. It's got the quarter moons and the full moons. It has the eclipses, the days the sun changes signs. So all the sun signs. When I teach astrology, because I was taught in a class, a very small, rigorous liberal arts education, and we use the Socratic method. I like to ask questions, right? I like to ask a lot of questions. So when I'm teaching astrology, one of the ways I do it is, I'll tell people what's happening, like, okay, the full moon is in Taurus, and then I give them a question to reflect on. They can journal on it. They can talk about it with their friends. They can just think about it. And that's where the idea of the Sacred Arts Book of Hours was born. I wanted to give sacred artists a way of planning their time that was in alignment with the magic that we do, right? And the way that we live. And I wanted to also do that in a way that opened up to questions and help people kind of, think about some of the questions that they have. And so that is where that idea came from. And then Kathy came and said, I love this, and we're going to make a beautiful book of it. And so that was how it was born.
Oh my gosh, it's beautiful. And and then it has all these blessings for, certain specific time periods for new moons and full moons. And it's just so beautifully done. I'm glad that the year's begun and I have it now for this new year. And
thank you so much.
Yes. And so, I before I let you go, I definitely want to congratulate you on your book that's coming out in 2019 through Sounds True. That's amazing. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. It is, I am very excited. I love Sounds True Publishing, and I'm deeply honored to get to be a part of their family, of their author family. And yes, the book is called Making Magic, Weaving Together the Everyday and the Extraordinary. It is going to be about some of the things that we've talked about today. It's my approach to making magic and the various ways of living a magical life that are available to everyone. So I'm very much looking forward to sharing it with our community.
I'm so excited. Okay, I can't wait to see that come out. And again, I just want to thank you for joining me on the podcast and all that you share and that you offer. And you bring such quality to the practice of magic and alchemy and ritual. You are my absolute go-to. If I need to figure out a ritual or something, or if I need a blessing, I go to brianasaussy.com. So thank you so much, Briana, and happy eclipse.
Oh, happy eclipse, Christina. Thank you so much as well.